Hey Reddit, I'm here because I don't know what else to do. Writing this out feels like the only way to make sense of everything that's happened. My name's Tom, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had a pretty solid life. I was married to my wife, Megan, for nearly 10 years. We had a nice house in the suburbs, 2 dogs, and a shared history that went back to our early 20s. People always told us we looked like the perfect couple. I thought so too. Sure, we'd had our ups and downs like any married couple, but I honestly believed we were happy, that we were building a life together. I thought we were in it for the long haul. Megan was always a little high maintenance, if I'm honest. She loved the finer things, designer handbags, fancy dinners, weekends away at the best hotels. I didn't mind, though. I work as a small business owner, and while the hours are long and the stress high, I could afford to give her those things. And if I'm being honest, there was a part of me that liked it. I liked being the guy who could give her a comfortable life, the guy who made her happy. Or at least, I thought I did. But things started to change about 6 months ago. Looking back, the signs were there, and I guess a part of me just didn't want to see them. Megan started going out a lot more than usual. She'd mention a girls' night here, work event there, stuff that hadn't been a regular thing before. At first, I brushed it off. I thought maybe she was making new friends, filling her time while I was putting in those long hours. I was working hard, maybe too hard, but it was all for us. Or so I thought. Then the late night started. Megan would leave in the morning for work, dressed a little sharper than usual, a bit more makeup than I remembered her wearing, and then she'd come back late, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers. She was always cagey about where she'd been, giving vague answers and rolling her eyes if I asked too many questions. If I asked what she'd been up to, she'd snap back with, "Why are you so interested all of a sudden?" Or, "Maybe if you spent more time with me, you wouldn't have to ask." Those little digs got under my skin, but I tried to keep the peace. I didn't want to be the insecure husband who interrogates his wife every time she leaves the house. But it didn't stop there. She became colder, more distant, and sometimes downright cruel. Little things that I thought we shared, a joke, a look, an inside reference, would make her roll her eyes. She'd say things like, "Honestly, Tom, do you even know who I am anymore?" Or, "If you cared half as much about me as you do about that damn business, maybe I wouldn't feel so miserable." Hearing things like that hurt, but I convinced myself it was just a rough patch, that maybe she was going through something she didn't know how to talk about. Then came the weekends. She'd announce plans without any real explanation, saying she'd be gone for the day, with friends I'd never heard of, or mention she was staying over at a friend's place last minute. When I'd ask who she was going out with, her answers were vague or dismissive. One Saturday, she left early in the morning for a brunch and didn't come back until almost midnight, claiming her phone had died and that she just lost track of time. I was starting to feel the weight of something wrong, pressing on my chest in a way that was impossible to ignore. After that weekend, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was going on, something she wasn't telling me. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. But the nagging feeling just wouldn't go away. So, one Thursday evening, after she'd left her laptop open on the kitchen counter, I made a decision that still makes me feel sick to my stomach. I know I shouldn't have done it. I know it's a betrayal of trust. But something compelled me to look. Call it gut instinct, call it desperation, call it whatever you want. But I did it. I opened her laptop, clicked on her email, and there it was. An email notification from someone named Eric popped up right at that moment, as if the universe itself was screaming at me to pay attention. My hands started shaking as I clicked into her inbox. I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. And as I read through those messages, I felt everything I thought I knew about my life shatter into 1,000 pieces. The emails were intimate, far more than just friendly banter. Eric wrote things like, "I can't wait to hold you again," and "Last weekend was incredible. Counting down the days until we're together again." My stomach churned as I read her responses. Messages filled with flirtation, affection, and promises of secret meetings. She was careful with her words, but it was painfully clear what was going on. I could feel the anger and hurt boiling up inside me, but I forced myself to read through every message, every sickening detail. She had been seeing him for months, meeting him on weekends when she claimed to be with friends, sneaking away during her so-called work events. Every late night, every cold look, every dismissive comment. It all made sense now. But here's the worst part. I still didn't confront her. I don't know why. Maybe part of me was scared to face the truth. Maybe I didn't want to believe that she was capable of something like this. Or maybe I wanted to catch her in the act, to confront her with undeniable proof, and watch her face when she realized she'd been found out. Whatever the reason, I decided to wait, to let her lie to my face one more time. The following weekend, Megan told me she was heading out of town for another work trip. She didn't even look me in the eye when she said it, and there was a coldness in her voice, as if she were daring me to question her. She left early Saturday morning, suitcase in hand, barely glancing back at me as she walked out the door. But this time, I didn't just sit at home, waiting. As soon as she was gone, I got into my car and started following her, keeping a few blocks behind so she wouldn't notice me. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, but I couldn't stop. I needed to see it for myself, needed to catch her with him to finally put an end to the doubt eating away at me. She drove to the next town over, taking a series of back roads until she pulled into a quiet residential neighborhood. I parked a safe distance away and watched as she got out of the car, glancing around before walking up to a small, modest house. A man opened the door. A man I'd never seen before, but who I knew without a doubt was Eric. I watched as she stepped inside, her body language relaxed, comfortable, even happy. They shared a quick embrace before disappearing into the house together, leaving me alone in my car, staring at the place where my marriage had just officially died. I don't know how long I sat there. It could have been minutes, or it could have been hours. All I know is that by the time I drove home, I was no longer the same man. I was hurt, betrayed, furious. And in that fury, a strange clarity emerged. I knew exactly what I needed to do. When Megan returned late Sunday evening, acting as if nothing had happened, I was ready. I sat at the kitchen table, waiting for her to come in, and when she saw me sitting there, her face froze. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes, but it vanished almost as quickly as it had appeared. "Hey," she said, her voice casual, almost indifferent. "Did you miss me?" I stared at her, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "How was your work trip, Megan?" She blinked, her mask slipping just a little. "Fine. Productive." "Productive," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air between us. "Did you get a lot done with Eric?" Her face went pale, her mouth opening and closing as she searched for a response. In that moment, I could see her mind racing, scrambling to come up with a lie that would explain everything, to smooth over the cracks in the life she'd shattered. But I didn't give her the chance. I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone and opening her emails, the ones I'd saved as screenshots. I laid the phone on the table, turning the screen so she could see it clearly. Her face crumpled, her eyes widening as she took in the messages. She tried to speak, to offer some excuse, some justification, but no words came. And for the first time, I saw her as she truly was, someone who had lied to me, betrayed me, and cared so little for our life together that she'd thrown it all away without a second thought. "Megan," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I loved you. I built a life with you. And this is what you chose." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel sympathy, didn't feel anything but the hollow ache of betrayal. She looked down at her hands, and for a moment, there was silence between us, a heavy, suffocating silence. Then, with a shaky breath, Megan finally spoke. "Tom, I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know what else to say. I know I messed up, okay? I know I hurt you. I know I did. But you have to understand, things haven't been right between us for a long time. I felt alone. I felt trapped. And Eric, he just made me feel alive again." Her words hit me like a slap. Alive? I thought. Was that what she felt? Trapped? Alone? I'd given everything I had to build a life with her, to make her happy, and this was what I got in return. She felt trapped? She felt alive with him. I could feel the anger bubbling up, threatening to explode, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me break down, of seeing just how deeply her betrayal had wounded me. "I'm sorry you felt trapped, Megan," I said, my voice cold. "But how did lying and sneaking around fix that? You could have come to me. You could have talked to me. We could have worked through this together. But instead, you decided to go behind my back. You made that choice, Megan." She wiped at her eyes, looking down at the table, as if the answers to her problems were somehow written in the grain of the wood. "I know, Tom. I know I should have talked to you. But you were so focused on work. Always working, always stressed. It was like I was just a part of the background. Like I didn't matter." I shook my head, unable to believe what I was hearing. "So that's it? You cheated because you didn't feel important enough? Do you know how many hours I've spent working to give you this life? The vacations, the clothes, the house. Everything I did was for us, Megan. But apparently, that wasn't enough for you. Apparently, the life we built together wasn't enough for you." Her face hardened then, and her voice took on a sharp edge. "And maybe if you had been here, Tom, maybe if you'd been more than just a paycheck and a partner, I wouldn't have felt the need to look elsewhere." There it was. The knife twisted. She was blaming me. Somehow, this was my fault. Somehow, she'd twisted her betrayal into a story where she was the victim, where my hard work and dedication had driven her to another man. "You don't get to put this on me," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "I was here, Megan. I was here every night. I was here every weekend. Maybe I wasn't perfect, but I was committed to us. I was committed to you. But you threw it all away. You didn't even give us a chance." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up my hand, stopping her. "No, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear any more excuses." A part of me expected her to fight back, to try to defend herself. But she just sat there, looking defeated, her shoulders slumped, her gaze fixed on the floor. I don't know if she felt remorse, guilt, or shame. Maybe she felt nothing at all. But in that moment, I knew there was nothing left to say. The life we'd built, the marriage we'd shared, was over. It had ended the moment she'd chosen to betray me, to choose another man over the vows we'd made to each other. Without another word, I stood up and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her sitting there in silence. My mind was racing, my heart pounding, as I walked up the stairs to our bedroom. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started packing, just a few essentials, enough to get me through the next few days. I needed to get out, to clear my head, to put some space between myself and the woman I no longer recognized. As I packed, I could hear her moving around downstairs, the soft sounds of her footsteps echoing in the quiet house. I wondered if she knew that this was it, that our marriage was truly over. Part of me wanted to see her cry, to see her beg for forgiveness, but another part of me felt nothing but a hollow emptiness, a numbness that spread through my entire body. When I went back downstairs, she was sitting on the couch, staring at the wall with a vacant expression. She didn't look up as I walked past her, and I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. I got into my car and drove, not knowing where I was going, only that I needed to get as far away from her as possible. I ended up at a hotel on the other side of town, checked in under my name, and spent the night staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find any answers. All I knew was that the life I'd known, the future I'd planned, had been ripped away from me in the cruelest way possible. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My body ached, my head was pounding, and the reality of my situation came crashing down on me all over again. I was alone, in a hotel room, my marriage in shambles. It felt surreal, like I was trapped in some kind of nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone, debating whether or not to call someone. I hadn't told anyone about Megan's affair, hadn't even told my closest friends. Part of me felt ashamed, like admitting what had happened would make it more real, more humiliating. But I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me make sense of it all. I ended up calling my friend Chris. He was my best friend, the guy who'd stood by me through every rough patch in my life. I told him everything about Megan, about the emails, about catching her with Eric. He listened quietly, letting me get it all out, and when I finished, he took a deep breath. "Tom, man, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice filled with sympathy. "I can't believe she did that to you. I always thought you two were rock solid." "Yeah," I said bitterly, "so did I." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and then Chris spoke again. "Listen, you don't have to go through this alone. If you need a place to stay, my guest room's open. And if you need a lawyer, well, I know some people who can help with that too." The word lawyer hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't even thought that far ahead. Divorce. The end of everything. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face that reality, but what other choice did I have? Staying with Megan was out of the question. I couldn't look at her, couldn't even think about her, without feeling a surge of anger and betrayal. "Thanks, Chris," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "I might take you up on that." We talked for a while longer, Chris doing his best to lift my spirits, reminding me that I was strong, that I could get through this. But as supportive as he was, I knew that this was something I'd have to face on my own. No amount of encouragement could take away the pain of betrayal, the hollow ache that had settled in my chest. After I hung up, I spent a few hours walking around the city, trying to clear my head. I thought about everything I'd given to my marriage, all the sacrifices I'd made, the years I'd invested, the dreams I'd built around a future with Megan. And now, all of that was gone, shattered by her selfishness, her lies. By the time I returned to the hotel, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I couldn't change what had happened. I couldn't make Megan love me or undo the choices she'd made. But I could take control of my own life, rebuild something new, something better. I pulled out my phone and started looking up divorce lawyers, feeling the weight of each click as I moved toward the inevitable. It was painful, yes, but it was also freeing. I was taking the first steps toward a new life, a life that didn't include her. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and difficult conversations. I officially filed for divorce, and with the help of my lawyer, served Megan the papers. She was shocked, though I couldn't understand why. Did she really expect that I'd just forgive her, that we could somehow go back to what we'd been? When I handed her the papers, she looked up at me with a mixture of anger and sadness, as if I was the one who'd broken her heart. "So this is it, then?" she asked, her voice trembling. "After everything we've been through, you're just going to walk away?" I looked her in the eyes, feeling a calm I hadn't expected. "You walked away first, Megan. You walked away the moment you chose him over us." She didn't say anything after that. She just took the papers, her hands shaking, and I left without looking back. In the months that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I moved into a new apartment, redecorated the space to make it feel like my own, and focused on my business. The pain didn't go away overnight. It lingered, like a dull ache that would flare up in moments of silence. But slowly, I began to heal. I reconnected with old friends, took up new hobbies, and started focusing on myself for the first time in years. It wasn't easy, but each day felt a little lighter, a little easier. I was learning how to live on my own terms, without the weight of betrayal dragging me down. Over time, I realized that Megan's betrayal didn't define me. Yes, it had broken me, shattered the life I thought I'd have, but it had also forced me to grow, to confront my own worth, to learn what I truly wanted. It taught me that I deserved better, that I deserved someone who would choose me wholeheartedly, without hesitation. One evening, as I was sitting in my new place, looking out over the city lights, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. I'd survived the worst. I'd come through the fire, and I was stronger for it. Looking back, I realized that Megan's betrayal, as painful as it had been, was a turning point. It had opened my eyes to the kind of life I wanted, the kind of love I deserved. And as I sat there, watching the world move on around me, I felt ready to step into that new chapter, to build something real, something meaningful. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I was excited to find out.